Hola, aquí estamos otra vez en Casa SEAT, en la tercera y penúltima jornada del Be New, Barcelona New Economic Week. Sois ya más, a ver si me centro, de 10.000 asistentes, de 10.000 participantes procedentes de 4 continentes, Europa, África, Asia y América. Y esto solo lo permite la tecnología. Gracias a ella, recordad que podéis contar con el B-Village, que os permite contactar con 128 empresas y con potenciales clientes y colaboradores de los 5 sectores que ha juntado, que ha reunido, interconectado BNew: Real Estate, E-Commerce, Digital Industry, Logistics y Economic Zones. También podéis visionar los contenidos emitidos hasta ahora en el Get Inspired, la plataforma que pone a vuestra disposición Be New, solo hasta mañana, hasta el 9 de octubre. Y todo ello gracias a la inteligencia artificial de la plataforma que se ha creado especialmente para Be New. Ha supuesto una inversión de 2 millones de euros. Bueno, fomentar el conocimiento es uno de los objetivos de Be New. Adquirir nuevos skills es una de las recomendaciones que hemos escuchado hasta ahora muy repetidamente. Y aprender de la experiencia, ¿no? La experiencia con paciencia, que es la madre de la ciencia, que se ha dicho toda la vida. Pues de eso va el panel de hoy, el panel BAFRICA 2. ¿Qué lecciones podemos extraer de la experiencia COVID-19 en el comercio y desarrollo de África? Este es el primer panel de hoy y queremos agradecer especialmente a African Economic Zone Organization por su apoyo en este panel. Ahmed Benis es su secretario general y es de Marruecos. Salam, Ahmed.
Hola, buenas.
Hola, buenas. Él moderará este diálogo entre Willy Chumba, de Zimbabue, y Stefano Inama, de Suiza. Good morning, everyone. Buenos días. Y cuando tú quieras, Ahmed, todo tuyo.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We are very pleased to be here with you today. And of course, I would like to start by extending our thanking to the organization team of the BNew, and of course, the panelists for this that will join us for this outstanding panel. My name is Benis Ahmed. I'm the Secretary General of Africa Economic Zones Organizations and also the Group Business Development Director of TangerMed Group. So for the one who don't know Africa Economic Zones, we are the representative of the Economic Zones community, and we gather more than 80 members representing 45 African countries. Let me share some insight about the development of economic zones in the African continent. So the special economic zones were adopted relatively late in the continent, and most of the African countries did not execute their programs till late 90s. And as of today, there are more than 189 operating economic zones in the continent, 47 projects that has been announced for completions. But since its inception, the special economic zones in the continent have given a significant boost to FDI flows, creating an attractive investment conditions and supporting job creations. And over the past 5 years, 60 million jobs have been created in agro-processing, industrial fields, and services. And African economic zones are also facing an uncertain period as of COVID-19. It disrupts their activities and hinder their operations due to the lockdown restrictions. But since most African economic zones are reliant on manufacturing and export-led activities, so the global pandemic has also put the diversification of the global value chain as a center stage, involving the economic zones to be considered as a major stakeholder to implement innovative policies and innovative solutions. The new wave of the global supply chain could also provide opportunities to expand into new fields of activities and lead to new stimulus through attracting new investments and improving the market demand. The COVID-19 has also demonstrated that the best use of the technology can also help the African special economic zones in supporting regional integrations. And it can, through regional sourcing, supply chain, promote regional trade and integrations. But this needs more commitment from the African leader to seize the opportunities that the Continental Free Trade Agreement can offer. Investors and industrialists based in the special economic zones would certainly be encouraged by greater regional integration, which would offer a larger nearby market, a greater sourcing opportunities, and this would in return support the local private sector development, job creation in the regional economies. So today's deliberations will address topic with major interest for the economic zones community, as well as the business and investors networks. So we will try, together with my colleagues, to share some insight and information related to the Africa's trade facilitations reform, the contribution of special economic zones, as well as the opportunity that the African Continental Free Trade Agreements could offer in driving Africa's special economic zones development post-COVID-19 crisis. So I'm very pleased to introduce the experts that will be sharing this panel, namely Dr. Stefano Inama, is a Chief Technical Assistant at the UNCTAD, and he has over 30 years of experience in advising government and regional economic communities around the world on trade policies, issues, and negotiations. So he's with a lot of expertise, and he will be sharing very important information today. My brother, Dr. Willy Shamba, he's the second expert, and he is a senior expert and advisor at the African Union Commission. And his area of focus is in custom and trade facilitation, mainly in the African Continental Free Trade Area support. So without waiting, I leave the floor to Dr. Stefano Inama to share with us some estimated facts and figures related to the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on Africa's trade. Stefano, please.
Thank you, Ahmed. And yes, I'm speaking from UNCTAD, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, which is the leading UN agencies on trade and development. And one of our focus is on Africa. And just recently, we have been lucky because the WTO issued a report just 2 days ago on 6 October about the forecast of the impact of the crisis on world trade. And apparently, the estimates are saying that the world trade will fall by 9.2% in this year, which is less than previous estimates of about 13%. So this is rather good news in the sense that the crisis will have a less impact than expected. But I think, for Africa, what is important is where, and because these are general figures. When we have to relate it to the African context, we have to see what are the sectors, because when we compare where there has been the sharpest decline of these world trade overall figures, we will see that the sectors where Africa is heavily reliant, which is mining and oils, they have recorded a sharpest decrease by 38%, which is much deeper than overall other decrease like in agriculture, because people, in spite of the crisis, they still needed to have food, and therefore, compared with previous year, there has been a loss of 5% compared to 38% in mining and oils. And this is causing concern for the major African exports, which are heavily concentrated in mining and oils, which also caused as well a fall of the oil prices. Now, this fall not only in merchandise trade, but also in investment flows, and global and the regional level. The UNCTAD World Investment Report, which has been released this summer, forecasted a sharp decline of greenfield investment by 50% in the context of an overall decline of investment, foreign direct investment of 40%. Now, the issue is now estimates are telling us that there has been a sharp fall. Now, what is the outlook? Because now, I mean, it's time that we'll look ahead. And what are the outlook? What are the solutions which could be envisaged to cushion, I mean, to lessen the impact on COVID-19 on global trade and on Africa especially? One issue that is emerging is that there has been a resurgence of world trade, especially in the last month after the release of the lockdown, especially in June and July. But again, where? I mean, there has been this increase of trade, and that is important for Africa. And also another question that is looming on the horizon is we're seeing that Europe and the United States, they have the banks and the government, they have injected funds, I mean, to make a restarting of the economy. There has been a huge fiscal and financial stimulus to get the economy restarted. The question is how this will be possible in Africa to get the economy restarted, because African governments and financial they have less possibilities than European and US counterparts. Well, there are, I think that the international community is already putting up instruments in order to assist Africa recovery. And there has been one is also induced by Africans themselves, is the African Continental Free Trade Area, and also the investment protocol that is going to be negotiated, hopefully, and implemented as soon as possible in order to foster investment. But also there are activities by donors like the US. They have a Prosper African Initiatives with a program of investing about 60 billion in Africa investment, of which 5 billion in Ethiopia. We have also other investment funds provided by UK in a kind of post-Brexit intervention for Africa of about 8.5 billion, and also, of course, other initiative by China, Russia, and also France, which has been reported in the World Investment Report of UNCTAD and discussed more at length. These are, I would say, the outlook for 2021, 2022. The outlook will say that most likely the world trade will raise in 2021, but will not back to the level of the previous years. We will have to wait for a full recovery of 2022. That's the overall landscape, and then during our discussion we can focus more on Africa issues. I think that the biggest challenge is that the sectors where Africa was relying, which were oil, tourism, minerals, and also agriculture. Agriculture meaning flour and vegetables, which were air freighted. This is where, I mean, unfortunately, we like it or not, there has been an impact. And now we have to start to look at the recovery and using the tools to boost this recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefano. Thank you, Stefano. And I'm very, let's say, happy to hear some insights and some facts and figures, even if it's sometimes just an estimate, but at least it provide, let's say, general overview of about what are the challenges that we would be facing in supporting the African economy and the contribution of the special economic zones today to recover from the COVID-19 crisis. One of the main challenges was also to speed up the trade facilitations reform and also helping the cross-border trade across the continent. So let me go back to my friends, Dr. Willy Shumba. He will be sharing some insights from his point of view and from the African Union point of view. Dr. Willie, your mic, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and greetings to you all. Yes, COVID-19 brought some experiences which did affect trade facilitation and the cross-border economic activities. When you talk of trade facilitation, you are looking at the processes, procedures, and all the necessary requirements in order to move goods from one point to the other without delay. Now, COVID-19 did affect that side. And the other side was cross-border economic activity. COVID-19 also did affect cross-border economic activity, which was taking place, I'm sure, which was taking place not only in Africa but the world over. So COVID-19 brought some learning experiences to both business and governments, always to be innovative on how to do business, and how to conduct business better. I mean, COVID-19, it basically affected your air transport network, your cross-border road network. It affected ports. Some ports were closed. And, during the early days, these were basically closed. But with the going on of time, the African Union had to identify some corridors, trade corridors, for the essential goods, to move, and also even for the transport sector, and also our customs administrations also had to be innovative, where trade processes were relying on manual in order to facilitate the movement of goods, in order to be responsive to the situation. Innovative ways had to be done. Automation, there was greater use of automation in order to get goods moving. The use of non-intrusive equipment for the various searches. So there were various means which governments and the business sector learned during the COVID-19 experience. But one essential point which came out was the need for the manufacturing sector, to strengthen the manufacturing sector, and also the need for industrialization in Africa. The need to have value chains, and the need to manufacture some products within the continent. And this is a very important point, because this is where I think the special economic zones come in. They offer an opportunity in that you are able to have your industries in the continent, in the regions, and you are able to supply products at best. Of course, you cannot entirely do away with import and export in this global environment, but special economic zones play a very important role in that you are able to supply products for the continent within the continent, and you are able to have linkages within the continent and to be able to supply the goods. Actually, it was a learning lesson in that during the period, some of the PPEs, protective equipment which was required, some innovative ways were done, and some of these products, some of these essential products required during the COVID had to be manufactured in the continent. So the COVID experience was it was a turning point to an extent that even after COVID, I foresee the situation changing for the better in the manner in which business is to be done. The traditional way that people have relied upon, people have shown, the COVID has shown that we can do certain things in other ways. There are other ways, and we can manufacture some essentials. Customs processes can be speeded up through automation. Physical presence is always not necessary, and you also need to make sure that trade corridors are available to move goods fast. And another element is cooperation amongst the various stakeholders. You know, COVID and trade facilitation issues and the cross-border movement, it involved cooperation amongst various stakeholders, from your health departments in government, your agricultural departments in government, your transport sector, your logistics sector. So one of the experiences was for closer cooperation amongst all the various sectors in order to move goods, and like I have said also, even to make sure that goods are produced in Africa using the various opportunities like the special economic zones. So in a nutshell, this is how I can sum up the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Willie. I think what you've mentioned is very, very interesting. And I think that one of the most prominent features of the global trading landscape in the recent year has been the worldwide proliferation of bilateral and regional trade agreements. And Africa is no exception to this pattern. And the African government has also embarked in various regional integration processes with the aim and the objective of opening up a regional market and creating new opportunities for intra-regional trade and industrial development on the continent. And this is clearly what you mentioned earlier, Willie, and what also Stefano highlighted. So in this sense, we are entitled to develop new processes for the supply chain, supporting the vision of creating one African market and the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that stand for making a significant contribution to reducing trade transaction costs and facilitating the cross-border trade. So it also aims to boost the intra-African trade, enhancing the global trade performance and supporting regional and continental value chain, contributing to the expansions and diversifications of the continent's productive capacity. So in the African context and within the Continental Free Trade Agreement in particular, the special economic zones have proven to be a trigger for the development of regional industrial policy and could be considered as an important platform for scaling up regional production and export, boosting intra-regional trade, and promoting greater competitiveness in regional manufacturing industry. The special economic zones would play also a key role in improving regional networks of production and trade by enhancing the country's productive and distributive capacity in a strategic manner that countries' capacity complement each other. This would enable cross-border cooperations among public and private stakeholders. So we need to investigate opportunities to build innovative regional value chain framework in different sectors. And this need better technology, higher quality inputs to support the trade facilitation reform. And of course, this could be extended to cross-border cooperation, project collaborations, resource sharing, and communications between the African Economic Zones community. I think that we need more insights on the Continental Free Trade Agreements, more insight to share with our audience. So, Dr. Willie, what do you think about, I mean, is the Continental Free Trade Agreement, is it an opportunity for trade development in the continent?
Okay. Thank you. You raise a very important issue about the African Continental Free Trade Area. And it is an opportunity for the world, it is an opportunity for Africa to do business. And let me just give you an overview of the African Continental Free Trade Area. It is a continental free trade area for 55 African countries. And in terms of the number of countries participating, 55 African countries, that will be, in terms of the number of countries, that will be the biggest free trade area so far since the formation of the World Trade Organization. We do have a lot of regional trading arrangements, but what you'll find is these regional trading configurations are normally for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 countries. But here we are talking of the African Continental Free Trade Area, making the continent one market. And so far, it has been very promising. In fact, the African Continental Free Trade Area has achieved quite a lot. You can imagine the negotiations for 55 countries by 55 countries were conducted within a period of 2 years. And it is a continental free trade area which will cover trade in goods, trade in services, those negotiations on trade in goods and trade in services, and how to handle dispute. Those negotiations have been concluded. But as Stefano indicated earlier on, there are certain issues which are still under negotiations. For example, your investment, issues pertaining to investment, issues pertaining to competition policy, issues pertaining to intellectual property rights. And as we talk right now, there is already talk that we need, Africa also needs to negotiate on issues pertaining to e-commerce. And that was as a result of what Africa and the world learned during COVID, that e-commerce is going to dominate. Actually, e-commerce is coming in heavily. So there is already talk of negotiations on e-commerce. So the African Continental Free Trade Area is talking of liberalizing trade in goods and services, to open up the continent for investment, to industrialize the continent so that the continent can be able to supply goods both continentally and also globally. Eliminate tariffs, eliminate non-tariff barriers, and bring up close cooperation amongst all the various stakeholders in order to produce, to move goods, and to facilitate trade. So, again, there is an opportunity there when you look at special economic zones, because there is an opportunity. Because there is an opportunity to come and invest and supply goods within the continent. There are so many industries required: the automotive industry, the pharmaceutical industry, value addition, value chains. So all those are areas which open up opportunities, and it's actually opportunities for investment and industrial development. And again, like I have said, special economic zones would play a role. At the moment, we are looking at a market. I've said 55 countries, but in terms of numbers, you are looking at a market of 1.2 billion. And it's estimated that in the next 10 years, you could be looking at a market exceeding 1.7 billion. A market which is a market which needs goods supplied, from consumables to whatever you can, whatever any business person can think of. So it's a great opportunity created by the African Continental Free Trade Area. And the African Continental Free Trade Area itself, the agreement, it recognizes the importance of special economic zones. Actually, the provisions in the agreement actually talk of that special economic zones are a platform to accelerate development. And it encourages the countries to take advantage of the special economic zones, to develop value chains, and to take advantage, to create an investment climate for this facility, the special economic zones. So all these are opportunities which are being created by the African continental free trade area. And special economic zones are not really a new phenomenon in Africa. I believe we've got over 30 countries with special economic zones. But with these opportunities coming up, it actually enhances those who are already there, and it creates opportunities for others to come in. I also need to mention that the African Continental Free Trade Area has created trade facilitation instruments in order to facilitate trade to those who want to come and invest, and also for intercontinental trade. They have developed, African Continental Free Trade Area has developed instruments to ensure that that type of trade, that trade is supported. There is a customs cooperation instruments to enhance customs cooperation. There are instruments on transit to ensure that goods in transit don't incur extra cost and they are not delayed. There is a mechanism on how to handle non-tariff barriers to make sure that wherever they occur, they are dealt with expeditiously. There are also various instruments pertaining to standards so that those who are in the manufacturing sector, they are quite aware of the various standards which are required. And all these instruments are benchmarked against international best practices set by the World Trade Organization. So the opportunities are there. In fact, without trade facilitation, costs go higher, cost of production, and the landed price of goods are high. But with trade facilitation instruments there, it now means, it also means that the African Continental Free Trade Area has really set up a package to ensure industrialization, to ensure investment, and to ensure that goods are produced at minimum cost. So this is what I can also say as a way of showing that the African Continental Free Trade Area has done all it can to make sure that there are necessary support instruments to see this a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Willie. Thank you. I think we all agree that the Continental Free Trade Agreement is definitely a great opportunity for the continent. You truly mentioned that it's a greater market. It's also an instrument to accelerate the development of special economic zones, supporting let's say the development of value chain, a regional value chain complementarity, industrial complementarity between country. Special economic zones is definitely the instrument or the platform, the tools that will support the development of such conditions, and let's say would offer the right investment conditions to attract investors, to develop industrializations, to support, let's say, trade between between countries, and this is definitely our responsibility as economic zones leaders, and for that we have many challenges, and there is many reform that has to be undertaken. So. From the point of view of UNCTAD and you, Dr. Stefano, in AMA, what are the main recommendations with regards to the development of economic zones, and what would be the perspective on effective management that economic zones should undertake in the continent?
Thank you, Ahmed. I would say I'll show Ahmed this. It is a mask. Okay, so and at a certain point in the Western world, there has been a lack of this surgical mask, and this has created in the mind of governments, but also of people, two basic, I would say, trends in economic governance. One is the imperative to increase the supply chain resilience. Governments and people need to have a security in supply of mask, but also supply of inputs, to do manufacturing. And where Africa is well placed in the sense that it has a mining sector is providing inputs to a world economy, starting from the rare earth for producing mobile phones to copper to other. And there, obviously, the task there, is to increase value added to these products, which has been a kind of perennial challenge for the African continent, and hopefully the African Continental Free Trade Area will provide an opportunity to climb the ladder of the value chains. The second trend is, which, where the African Continental Free Trade Area could really help, is the pressure to increase national or regional, and there, is very important, productive capacity. There is a strong feeling, there is a strong economic governance imperative to establish a stable, reliable supply of inputs, but also these inputs have to be manufactured regionally or locally. There is the instance of reshoring, bringing back industries or foreign direct investment that was previously located outside our country, like in the US or in Europe, and there is a tendency of reshoring this in foreign direct investment which has been outside the home country. This is one of the challenge for the special economic zones, in the sense that the special economic zones administrator, they should look first at in their portfolio of the industries or services activities that they are located in their zone to see what are the trajectories of this investment in the sectors. It is a garment sector. The garment sector has had an impact. What is the new trajectory of this garment sector in the post-COVID scenario? So they have to eventually engage in new actions in order to ensure that the factories or the investment that are located in their zone remain in that zone and they're not reshored elsewhere. This is one first recommendation, I would say, a task, that has to be evaluated. It's a kind of internal assessment. What we have here now, we would like it to stay, not to move away and possibly increase. The second is eventually a rethinking of the possibility of having large projects linking to export-led performance. Perhaps, there is a need also to investigate more what are the possibility of the national and regional markets, especially thanks to the opportunities provided by the African Continental Free Trade Areas. And there, as Willie pointed out, is extremely important the trade facilitation concept, because the African Continental Free Trade Area will liberalize trade in Africa, but borders will remain, will not become a kind of new European Union where goods, may freely circulate. Borders will remain in place. And their trade facilitation and through smooth and rapid and quick transit of goods will be fundamental in order to ensure that the goods can circulate in the Continental Free Trade Area. And their trade facilitation is an essential and fundamental condition to be successful. And obviously, special economic zones administrators, they are there possibly to facilitate the inflows and outflows, inflows of inputs for local manufacturing and outflows of exports in the special economic zones. Where, they need to look at the possibilities of digitalization. I mean, the COVID has brought an enormous incentive for COVID-induced digitalization. I mean, which could and should provide new reading of economic opportunities and challenges for special economic zones administrators. These, I think, are the basic lessons that, and I would say directions that are contained also in the World Investment Report that UNCTAD has released, where there are precise, I would say, analysis on the trends, because when we have to be sector specific at times, especially, I mean, for Africa, which is heavily concentrated in few sectors, then we have to also to conduct analysis of the sector. And as I said at the beginning, analyze the trajectories of what the sector are doing. So what is automotive is doing, what the market on frozen flowers will be doing, and especially what are the oils and derivatives of the oil, you know, which are important for Africa exports and economic activities. Where are they going? These are the issues that each, I would say, special economic zone administrator, they should look into it and eventually putting an emphasis on regional and national capacities market to absorb the industrialization and trigger the industrialization of the productive capacities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stefano. I think what you mentioned is really important, and we do have a representative from special economic zones that follows this sessions. And this leads us to think about, let's say, the new orientations of the global value chains post-COVID-19 crisis, and if it will affect, if this would affect doing business in Africa. And we pick up some questions from the audience related to that. I'm just trying to summarize one or two questions that has been that has been shared. So with regards to the new, let's say, move of the global value chain, do you think that Africa and mainly the special economic zones would capture, let's say, new investments, and would this affect positively or negatively the doing business in the continent?
Well, I think that like in any crisis, there are challenges and opportunities. And I would say it very much depends on the sectors that we are looking at. For certain sectors, there will be more opportunities than for others. And then I would say that the special economic zone administrators, they have to really look into the possibilities offered by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and also the intersection between the possibilities of trading opportunities arising from the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and the fact that many African states they are enjoying a free trade with Europe and the European Union. So this offers a kind of a wide scenario for producing and basing and base productivity in the African region. Because if you produce in the African region and you have an efficient infrastructure, meaning efficient trade facilitation and digitalization in the African region, then producing there, you will enjoy basically free trade with Europe, with the United States, thanks to the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, and also, most importantly, by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. I think the numbers that Willie pointed out of the possibility of that market are really impressive. Yet they have to be made effective, and that's the importance also of the negotiations that are undergoing. I think the special economic zones administrators and the business society in Africa, they should really participate, really be involved intensively with their governments in order to make sure that the negotiations are concluded and the outcome of the negotiations are implemented by governments at local level. If the African Continental Free Trade Area will make a difference, will make it in this. The negotiations are concluded, the trade agreement is implemented, and the day after, customs implement at national level what has been agreed at African level. That will make a definitely change in the mind of administrators, in the mind of the Africa day-to-day business operation. Thank you.
No, fully agree, fully agree. And there are many talks today about moving some Chinese investments or European investments in China or and develop the nearshoring approach. So would this be with a benefit to the African continents, being very close to Europe, being very close to the Middle East, for instance?
But much will depend on the ability, as Willie pointed out, related to trade facilitation. Distance, especially in Africa. Many of the countries in Africa, they are landlocked. And we all know that the cost of moving a container within Africa is one of the highest in the world. So the capacity of Africa services abilities, to reduce the cost of movement of goods and services is crucial. And also the investors, they look at the fact that there is trade liberalization, but trade liberalization per se is unable to attract investment. You need much more than that in order to attract investment, especially investing in manufacturing, in productive capacities. That's what Africa needs more. I mean, obviously, trade liberalization is one factor, but trade facilitation, especially in customs procedures, is a decisive factor, as well as the ability by African government to upgrade the capacity of workers, which are largely unskilled. And there is a need to have training capacities for unskilled workers to provide services and a workforce which is more educated in order to engage in a digitalization of the economy.
Thank you, thank you, Stefano. We have 1 or 2 minutes left. Maybe Willie, last comment about the CFTA. Does it represent also an opportunity for the international investors community? Your mic, please. Your mic. Can you switch on your mic? All right.
Yes, the AFCFTA presents opportunities to produce goods which can be traded in Africa duty-free. The production of goods, the investment side of it, and the SEZ, the opportunities are open to anyone to come and invest and produce. What it means is the goods produced will be made in Africa goods. Of course, there are also special issues pertaining to the rules of origin, but it's an industrialization tool. It's a tool to develop Africa, and it's open for investors from all over the world to take advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you, Willie. Thank you, Stefano. I think we've almost covered the main topic of today's sessions. I think to all of us who works in the continent, live in the continent, who like the African continent, we should seize the opportunity of the African Continental Free Trade Agreements, work together, deploy and implement the best practices. This is our responsibility as a special economic zones leaders, but it is also the responsibility of our partner. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, for your moderation and good questions. Thank you. Special thanks for African Economic Zone Organization. Thank you also, Willie and Stefano, for being here, for your expert view. It's been so helpful to listen to you. And I say goodbye to you. Bueno, y a vosotros os dirijo en castellano. Muchísimas gracias por estar aquí. Continuamos en canal Economic Zones. El siguiente panel será Be Clean. Hasta ahorita.